What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another preview for DigitalChumps.com. This time we're going to be talking about the House of Ashes, the next entry in the Dark Pictures Anthology. I am joined with Ben. He's going to be asking me all the different questions, of course. Ben, we've already recorded this video once. Only because I'm an idiot and didn't capture your audio. So how about we're gonna shake it up for the second recording here. Go ahead and ask me some of the questions here that you have about House of Medan, and I will kind of answer them accordingly.
So,
Or not House of Medan, House of Ashes,
House of Medan,
Man of Medan, House of Ashes.
What is it? Little House of Medan,
little House of Medan.
So I have told you that I've played Until Dawn. It was an amazing game. One of the best horror games that's come out in a while. I have not touched the Dark Pictures Anthology, so am I going to be okay not having played those games and diving into this? Is there a connective tissue between the titles, or?
So yeah, this is absolutely, you're going to be able to jump right in on this if you haven't played the other games. The only through line through all the games have been this man known as the Curator. He's this guy who kind of comes in and he is telling the audience this story in his vast library of different horrific stories. He's kind of the only through line. I haven't seen anything regarding him in this story. His story is very interesting as kind of like a side story in the background in the first two games. It's almost like he works for some sort of organization, like a shadowy organization, but haven't seen much about him in this. Probably won't until the game actually comes out. But yeah, no, this is absolutely going to be a great first entry. Actually, I would say probably start with this one because everything about this game so far that I've seen, it looks way better than the other two games, just from a visual standpoint. And yeah. So what's your next question?
So I know that Man of Medan takes place on a boat, ship, whatever.
Right.
Little Hope is sort of like a Salem kind of town. What time period did those take place in? Like, was it modern day or modern day adjacent?
So both of them technically take place in modern day. Little Hope is a little weird because they do a lot of flashback sequences to like the 1600s in Salem, and or Little Hope, but it's Salem back in the day, like all the witch trials and everything. So, but they were both modern, and I would imagine that House of Ashes is going to be doing the same thing because they've been teasing a lot of, especially in this preview, they've discussed this temple, this underground temple that the players are going to be exploring, and that's like the main setting of the game, that these different soldiers, this fire team is going to be, they're going to find themselves in. And there was like this emperor who considered himself a god in the Mesopotamian era, we mentioned it in the last first recording of this. The Mesopotamian, that region was like the cradle of civilization. Everything has kind of sprouted off since, from that world. And so the idea behind this temple is this emperor built it as he saw himself as this god, but he did something to piss off the gods and then essentially cursed the temple and his people. How he did so and like what the means of that are left to be revealed. But I would imagine that this game is going to be flashing back to that. There's also some footage that we've seen of a World War II soldier, or perhaps World War I, not entirely sure. Has that same sort of military garb, like the old style military garb running through the caves. So I would imagine they're going to be kind of flipping back and forth between modern day stuff and, modern day. The game takes place in 2003 during the Iraq War, and you are a U.S. military squad. And so it's as modern it can be for 20 years ago. But yeah.
Well, I think that's actually a really interesting place to put a game like this because you've only had sort of like Middle East conflicts touched upon a few times, mostly in, first person games. Not really a setting for horror, though
Yeah,
I've seen a good amount of movies
yeah,
throughout the years using the Middle East as like a horror setting because there are the horrors of war going on,
yeah.
but it's
See,
interesting to throw people into it.
that's exactly what stuck out to me when I was first watching the preview. That you have all these horror games, and they easily could have made it like. So one of the big comparisons I'm drawing to this game is the movie The Descent, which follows a bunch of
Hmm.
spelunkers as they go down to the cave systems and they get stuck in the caves and they have to find their way out, and they encounter all these creatures in the caves. That's one of the big comparisons that I'm drawing between this game and that movie. But they're actually bringing in inspirations from Aliens and Predator as well. So they're bringing that kind of macho, military, we're badasses, we're going to go in there and we're going to fuck shit up and get out. And then, but they're actually very powerless
Yeah.
in this environment. And it's very interesting to see a game really tackle something like that, especially something like the Iraq War. Like this isn't, and they specifically said this is 2003 and in the Iraq War. So I'm very
Yeah.
interested to see them tackle, some of the controversies that were surrounding the war, especially in 2003. With
Yeah.
the WMD scares and the false intelligence and everything like that. We got a hint of it in this preview that they received some false intelligence. That's why they went to this village and they
Okay.
fell into this cave after a Al Qaeda attack kind of ruptured the ground underneath them. And so I'll be very interested to see how they tackle kind of the real world implications, because as you know,
Right.
all of these games that kind of, so as you know, from all these different games, if they're going to be tackling like a Middle Eastern war like Call of Duty or any of these other games, they always rename the location. It's never like
Yes.
Iraq. It's never Afghanistan. It's never any of these real world locations. Even Battlefield, it's a war with Russia all the time or China.
Yeah.
It's never, a war with Iraq or Afghanistan. So it'll be very interesting to see them actually discuss some of this stuff, even if, yeah, the moment to moment stuff or events in the game aren't necessarily about the war. The characters are in the war. They are engrossed in the war. That is why they are there in the first place. That they've been brought into the situation. So I'm interested to see them kind of tackle that in a different kind of way. Especially because it's like, Predator and Aliens. I feel like those two movies in general do a really good job of tackling, colonialism with, aliens, or,
Like an existential threat.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like when those horror movies do that. So it's very interesting what House of Ashes ends up doing. Whether or not they see it all the way through, we'll see. But there was some dialogue. There was some dialogue in the preview that I saw that really kind of hints that they might be tackling some of the heavier themes surrounding the Iraq War and stuff, but putting it into a different kind of context, or a more of a supernatural context.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see.
So, in terms of like visuals, we're a year or so separated from Little Hope.
Yeah.
What are some of the big differences between House of Ashes and the previous titles?
So it's very interesting because I'm frankly shocked that this game is coming out as soon after Little Hope as it is, because Man of Medan came out in what, 2017, and
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, and like Little Hope came out in 2020. That was a 3-year gap, and this is just a year later. So I'm kind of surprised that this is coming out as soon as it is. Obviously, this game looks like it was made for next-gen consoles. So visually, it's gorgeous. The facial capture, it really captures all of the minute detail in all of the faces to really show those different levels of fear. Because, like a good Naughty Dog game, right? Like Last of Us Part 2 or Uncharted 4, when you can see just the slight change of facial expressions can really sell a scene.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like, I always thought that the Dark Pictures Anthology and Until Dawn, even though it's older, did a really good job at showing a lot of the range of emotions when you're going through different horrifying experiences. But I always kind of felt like they were held back a little bit by the last gen hardware and technology at the time, where, for Until Dawn, you had Hayden Panettiere, in that game, and it was her, but it was her voice more so than her acting there. You know what I mean?
You were getting like sort of not LA noir levels of, but sort of like more broad facial movements, not like super subtle.
Exactly.
But I think, in a game like that where you're expressing like horror and like surprise and things like that, those work. But if you're trying for something more subtle, then you want really accurate facial capture.
Or for some of these games, Little Hope specifically, when you're trying to determine if somebody's telling the truth or if they're telling a lie, those little minute facial details can really sell you on what choice you want to make.
Yeah.
So I really feel like House of Ashes has taken the tech up a notch. The facial capture is amazing. Ashley Tisdale, she's in the game, and her facial capture is astounding in all the footage I saw of her in the game. The gameplay footage I saw was not of her perspective, unfortunately. I would imagine that they're going to be releasing that today. Like, if you're watching this video, you can go watch the gameplay reveal. They're probably showing her perspective. She's probably the main character of the game. But the side characters that I've seen are all excellently animated. But other than that, for it being a cave, and there's not a lot of light, the game is just gorgeous. Like, where the light shafts, and I'm going to be weaving in and out some video footage of what I've seen into this as well. So you're probably seeing it now. But the light shafts that come down and illuminate different parts of the world to kind of give it like some really dark sections of a cave where you have to use your flashlight, which I'll get into in just a second. You have to use your flashlight to really poke into those dark areas to see what's over there. It really creates a vibe that Man of Medan and Little Hope had like that vibe to them, but this really kind of accentuates that. It really wants to bring you into that world as opposed to showing you that world, if that makes any sense. But it's very exciting. But yeah, the only other things that kind of differentiate this game from the first two games in the Dark Pictures Anthology are they're changing things up in terms of gameplay. Two very exciting things. First off, they're getting rid of the fixed camera angle. So the first two games, if you didn't already know, you had a little bit of options in terms of moving the camera around, but you never really could freely move the camera, right?
Yeah, like Until Dawn, you'd be in a room and you could sort of shift the camera like left and right, like down a little bit, maybe you see something.
Yeah.
Just to get a better sense of the environment.
Yeah, you could kind of pan it around. Not like this. This is a true like third-person action adventure game, something you would imagine from like Uncharted or Tomb Raider or something. Those are like the best comparisons I can think of, where it's like behind the back, sometimes over the shoulder, in tight corridors and stuff, where you can freely move it any which direction. Of course, where you move the camera, the character is also looking. And that adds into the flashlight feature of the game, where everywhere you're looking, the character's pointing their flashlight. And the flashlight, as far as the devs explained, is going to be used to discover secret objects, secret locations, hidden doors that you may, honestly, I would imagine you're going to pass up in your first playthrough of the game. Half of these things. Because I don't know how... They didn't really talk about how big the explorable areas are, but it did seem like there were a lot of opportunities for you to go down hidden paths, which I'm very excited to see how they weave that into the story. They could
you might find a treasure, you might find lore, or like a path around a trap or something like that.
Yeah. So like one of the scenes that they showed off in the preview was one of the scenes with Ashley Tisdale where, you know, one of the characters kind of looks around with a flashlight and then looks down, and there's the classic little star, like interactable, you know, little telltale little blip that you can interact with the object. And you walked up to the object and it was this little statue, like handheld statue of Pazuzu, you know, if you've ever seen The Exorcist. And she actually makes a little joke about it. Like the soldier's like, what the hell is that? And she goes, oh, you've never seen a horror movie? And then like, that's where like it ended. So I'm excited to, you know, see what little objects you can find in the game, or if there's any secret paths to kind of branch off and maybe make a different choice. Because I feel like Man of Medan and Little Hope were both very linear in a way, where you didn't really have a lot of option you had like one or two paths you could take, right? But this game really seems like, and I could be wrong, and this is just kind of what I'm gathering, they didn't really talk about how many different options in terms of exploration. But I think it would be a great opportunity for them to have multiple paths that have different outcomes depending on which path you take. It's a cool idea. I don't know. We'll see. But what is there is very exciting, and what they showed off is really cool.
Now, in terms of like horror, are we talking like thriller? I know you mentioned Predator and Alien are inspirations, which is kind of gives me action horror in a way. If you're playing a group of soldiers, definitely that. Like we've seen that in movies before, but is it like gory? Is it jump scares? Like what should we expect?
It's gory. It's gory. It's going to be gory. There was a scene that I saw. So the idea is all the soldiers, you know, fell down, you know, they were having the battle on the top of the ground, and the ground fell underneath them, and they fell into the cave, right? Yeah. And some of them fell very hard into the cave. You know, like one of the soldiers fell into the mouth of this statue, right? So like he fell down into the mouth. So what happened to him? I don't know. But one of the soldiers that you come across, and actually I probably won't show the footage here because it is very gory. But I can't tell if he's strung up by barbed wire or parachute strings. But he's like hung upside down, and the cords and everything have like ripped into his midsection, and he's like bleeding down, you know, his face and everything, hanging upside down. And it's hyper violent. So obviously you'll get that kind of horror. And I fully expect that kind of horror. But like you mentioned, they outright said that two of their inspirations for this game are Aliens and Predator. So that's the kind of vibe you can get. Macho soldiers going into a situation that they think they're prepared for, but are quickly... what's the word? Out of their element. Yeah. They're overwhelmed. So that's what I can see going past like this first hour that I kind of saw of the game being really what they expand on. Now, I will also say this. They also said that another big inspiration for the game was At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. So will be very interesting to see how they weave in maybe some of the cosmic horror elements into this game.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, a lot of that of like Lovecraft's work is like that creeping dread that
yeah,
slowly builds over
yeah,
time until it becomes this unfathomable like
horror.
terror
Yeah,
that you can't do anything about. Which I mean, I guess in a way is kind of the Iraq War.
yeah,
But you're doing it early on, like in 2003. Like we were barely in there at the time,
yeah.
and I can see like if they're gonna try drawing parallels between it, which is really interesting.
It is very interesting, and I'm really interested to see how they tackle everything. But if they bring in cosmic horror, I'm also wondering: are we going to get something? Have you ever seen Event Horizon?
Yes,
I'm wondering if
bad movie, but great.
yeah, it's a bad movie, but man, does it have some horrific
Oh yeah.
shit in it. And I'm really wondering if they're gonna weave some of that kind of terror into it.
If they're doing this World War One, World War Two thing, I feel like if they've got like a couple like narratives that take place before, then it would be really interesting to like weave those in there and create this
Yeah,
sort of drama with that. You know, you're the play like maybe the player is getting a sense of what's going on before the soldier, so it makes it even more terrible.
right. I am I'm very excited. Like the Dark Pictures Anthology games are some of the better horror games that we've gotten over like the last 5-6 years. Of course, you know, there's plenty of other horror games that have come out, but those are, I feel, some of the better crafted horror games because they do something different with every game. It's just you kind of go in knowing what to expect, but then they always flip it on its head. It's so I'm very excited to see what they do with House of Ashes. Of course, we're going to be playing it on PS5 and Series X, where it's going to look great. It's also coming out to PS4 and Xbox One. Of course, it's coming to PC. Coming out later this year, unless they announce a release date very soon, which they might. But all we know is it's coming out later this year. Ben, are you going to give it a shot?
Yeah, I'd like to. Honestly, I think there's been a couple times where Little Hope and Man of Medan have been on sale, and I've almost bought them because I want to play them with my girlfriend.
Right.
Like we both love horror, and those are kind of easy. I know that they would probably be easy games to get into, like Until Dawn.
They really are.
But I'll definitely give this a shot as well, especially if they package it, like if they do some sort of deal.
If they do it like a three game package, that would be awesome. That would be great. That'd be great. But yeah, Ben, that's all that we have to talk about for the Dark Pictures Anthology House of Ashes. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first preview since the reboot of the Digital Chumps YouTube channel. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to like this video. Be sure to share it with your friends. And of course, when you're ready to check out the full review of the Dark Pictures Anthology House of Ashes, be sure to come back to DigitalChumps.com later this year. Ben, thank you for joining me. Everybody, we'll see you next time.